Once upon a time and in Italy, a 4-year-old boy fell from the 8th floor balcony and died. And about a year later, in roughly the same place, a 6-year-old girl fell from there. An autopsy revealed that for at least a year before this, she had been subjected to constant brutal sexual abuse. And that's not even the scariest part of the story you're listening to. The story, where not all adults are monsters, but many, very many children are victims. And not a single parent is a protector. The story that took place in Parco Verde di Caivano, either in a suburban neighborhood or a separate state on the outskirts of Naples, once upon a time, in Italy. The girl was named Fortuna. Her father named her after her grandmother. But her mother is sure the name Fortuna doesn't suit their daughter. Everyone calls her Kika, sweetie. She really is a delight, cheerful, sociable, charming and friendly, the only blonde in the whole building, and as pretty as a doll. Hardly anyone can resist the pleasure of cuddling with such an angel. The little girl, however, isn't much of a conversationalist. Her speech is not perfect. Her mom even takes her to a speech therapist. But instead of words, Kika is more eager to respond with laugh. And she could easily kiss him on the cheek. After all, everyone around her are friends or relatives, and Parco Verde is like a big village where kids freely move from one apartment to another, and everyone keeps an eye on them. Just idyllic. It's good that Kika doesn't know. Actually, she lives in a ghetto surrounded by poverty and decay, where power belongs exclusively to the Camorra. This neighborhood, Green Park, was built to provide housing for the victims of the devastating 1980 earthquake. It was constructed as a temporary settlement for the next 10 years in an open field. Where people will work, what they will do after work, they didn't worry about. So only the poorest went there, those who had absolutely nowhere else to go. The result? Almost 40 years have passed, and only the degree of decay has changed in Green Park. Only 1 out of 100 people has a legal and permanent job, yet the district is the top in Europe for drug sales. Don Mauricio, the parish priest, with tears of joy blesses all who decide to leave this place. But there weren't many left to flee. Most had gone long ago. Few dare now. But Fortuna does not see any of this. She relates to the 2nd generation born here, and has no idea that life could be different. Maybe it's for the best, so her short childhood seemed happy to her. At least to others, she gave the impression of a child who had everything going well. It was only after Kika's death, when her drawings were shown to a psychologist, that she explained what was really going on in the girl's soul. But could anyone have noticed something was off earlier? In the drawings, there's never any son, which according to professionals symbolizes the father figure. But how could there be when the girl's father, like half the men in the district, is in prison? And the stepfather who replaced him has long since moved out. The houses depicted by Kika either have no windows at all or have windows covered with bars. What did you expect if the child's mother has paranoia and is terrified of open windows? Closes all the windows and everything she can because she just saw Antonio Gilio, the little son of the neighbor upstairs, fall from the 7th floor onto the asphalt. And yes, Fortuna presses the marker too hard. But she is overly hyperactive. The doctors have been informed the diagnosis is hyperactive disorder. The school curriculum was adapted. What else could the teachers do? Who later whispered that all their children were like that. All of them. Kika lived in constant tension, especially at home. She was afraid of women, tried to forget about the existence of men, and desperately wanted warmth and protection. But all this became clear only to the psychologist and only later, when besides the drawings there was already a conclusion based on the autopsy results. And in it, besides the description of countless bone and internal organ injuries sustained from the fall, the dry language of medical encyclopedias reports that anal tract injuries indicate numerous rapes that occurred chronically, but in fact did not happen on the day of the child's death. The day the child died, June 24th, Kika just finished her first school year and is enjoying her vacation. After a visit to the speech therapist, the girl was allowed by her mom to visit the neighbors upstairs. She often goes there to play with her best friends, 10-year-old Daria and 6-year-old Alexandra. There's also Raquel, but you can't really play much with a 3-year-old. Daria is busy, she has to wash the floor. So Fortuna and Alexandra are waiting for her to finish, sitting on the couch. Though it's uncertain, did Kika visit the neighbors or was she just planning to? It's not clear. No one disputes what happened. At 11:40, the girl's body was lying on the pavement in front of the house. The yard was crowded, but as often happens, it was impossible to sort out who had been there from the beginning, and who had arrived later. To the cries that Kiku had fallen, her mother rushes downstairs but doesn't find her daughter. the kind neighbor from the floor below, Vincenzo Dell'Aiaco. Hearing the thud on the ground, he called his son-in-law, Salvatore Muccio, who lives on the third floor. And that one too, apparently very kind-hearted, ran downstairs before his mother, picked the body up from the ground, put it in the car, and took it to the hospital. It's certainly a mistake to move the body if there's a risk of a spinal fracture. It should only be done under a doctor's supervision. But it's unlikely it made the situation much worse. The injuries were such that even if a team of resuscitators had been right there at the moment of the fall, they wouldn't have been able to save the child. However, because the body was moved, the exact location of the fall was determined only approximately, as there wasn't a single drop of blood left on the ground. Experts say this happens sometimes. You can determine where a person fell from based on the injuries. They determined it. The 8th floor, an unused terrace. Death was caused by the impact with the ground. Maybe that would have been the end of it. A girl fell from the roof, the building was in a dangerous condition, they didn't keep an eye out, it happens. A year ago a boy fell. He was actually at home with his mom. She said he wanted to see the helicopter leaned out of the window. By the way, Fortuna's friends, who she was supposed to play with but instead ended up falling, are his own sisters. Same house, same height, same kids. What a coincidence. Coincidences happen, and not just like that. When Antonio Giglio fell out of the window in front of his mother, only the left sandal was found on his body. The right one was never found. The same was true for Fortuna Lafredi's body. Mom, Antonio, and Marianne Fabuzza didn't ask questions back then, but this time they did. After all, she was supposed to be the last one who saw Kiku alive. She answered, "I don't know anything. Nobody came by. What right sandal?" The case was immediately closed and the child was buried. But the girl's body showed obvious signs of violence, and when her mother barely heard from the doctors that her daughter hadn't survived, she started shouting, "They killed her." Overall, some people were invited to give explanations to the police. They hung around on camera in the waiting room and listened. Just like the same Mariana Fabozzi. Antonio's grieving mother is instructing Fortuna's friends and roommates, the grandma and oldest daughter, to lie during questioning. Standard set. Basically, we haven't seen anything, we don't know anything. Dad was in the yard and Fortuna didn't come. Well, the other neighbors too, again a coincidence, saw nothing, know nothing, do not have a single story. But they are ready to cooperate with whoever, even with Raquel de Domenica from the 8th floor. Not a stranger, by the way, Fortunia's stepfather. Her mother is the aforementioned Claudio Longo. Her stepfather, although former, had broken up with the girl's mother, but her younger brother was born from him, so Raquel de Domenica is considered kind of a step-grandmother to Fortuna. The girl and her little brother often visit their former grandmother and stepfather, especially since Claudio Longo moved out from them and returned to his mother's apartment in the same building. Grandmother Raquel repeatedly said on camera, and in official records, that on that fateful day, she sat on the stairwell the whole time. Nobody, neither men nor women nor especially children, did not pass by her. It's really strange because this is the only staircase that leads to that one place where, according to expert opinion, Fortuna could have fallen. You could even think that the granny just forgot something. Age, poor diet, the condition of the blood vessels in her brain. If you didn't know that the old lady had the sense to pick up, hide, and then discard the lost right sandal of the deceased girl. I found a shoe on the balcony and threw it away because I don't want the police getting involved in my family's affairs. Once again, children die under strange circumstances in your house, and there are suspicions of a crime. And you're not just lying to the police, you're hiding what could lead to the killer. Granny Raquel didn't get anything for it, nothing at all, and it's unclear why. On the other hand, if we jail everyone who refused to cooperate with the police, we might as well demolish this whole wretched neighborhood. The main rule of omerta is silence. So, since potential witnesses collectively lost their memory, the police had no choice but to place around 100 wiretaps all over the house. And then, spend a week enjoying how adults only talk about the weather, while kids run around the house excitedly, searching for and breaking spy gadgets. They destroyed over half, but those that remained did their job. And 6 months later, on December 23rd, 2014, the first arrest happened. They arrested Salvatore Mucci from the 3rd floor, the same guy who picked up Fortuna's broken bodies from the ground. But the arrest isn't about that. And it turned out as a result of listening. Mucci regularly rapes his 12-year-old daughter. Maria dello Iacono, the girl's stepmother, stood up fiercely for her husband. It cannot be because it can never be. Their daughter is a virgin, and the cries of "please stop, it hurts," clearly heard on the recordings, are not from a girl, but the television. So a few days later, Maria was arrested as an accomplice. Yes, The mother was arrested for complicity in the rape of their daughter by the father. But that's not even the worst part of the story. Jumping ahead, I will say, these wonderful people really had nothing to do with Fortuna's death. But in this beautiful house, you'll find many more wonderful people. Too many. The next arrest happened just a year later on November 17th, 2015. And again, not because of the child's death. And again, parents for sexually abusing children. This time, our acquaintance Mariano Fabozzi, the mother of Fortuna's friends, went behind bars. Her current partner, Raimondo Caputa, known as Tito, is the father of her younger daughter and the stepfather to her 2 older daughters. Tito is a wonderful person, treating all 3 girls as if they were his own. So, according to the psychologist's conclusion, as a sexual object and nothing else. As a result of Daddy's games, the girls were so traumatized that all 3 of them had complete incontinence, from 3-year-old Raquel to 6-year-old Alessandra at the time, and to 10-year-old Daria. The staff at the family home that took in the girls after they were removed from the family were horrified at their condition. Raquel, who spoke first because due to her age she simply did not understand what Mom meant when she ordered silence, could not explain when it started. It's only clear that the little girl hasn't been potty trained yet. When she complained about the pain there, Mom said it was just diaper rash. It will hurt for a while, then stop. You'll get used to it eventually. The mom that Raquel drew in 2 versions, either with huge claws or as a butt. Just a big butt. Because she held her daughter while playing with Dad and made her watch when Mom played with him. Of course Raquel knows these are games for adults, but Raquel is not a child anymore. Kids watch cartoons, while their mom and dad showed her movies on TV. She taught her dolls and other girls to act like in the movies. Raquel could even teach the doctor if she wanted, as long as she chases away the huge black spider from her dreams, who's about to catch up with her and eat her. Yes, the spider has Dad's face. And Dad doesn't have a face, he has a penis instead. Raquel lives in the same apartment with her father's sister and grandmother, who has a magical name, Angela Angelini. But they don't save her from spiders. For these stories, the older sister Daria beat Rachel severely, afraid that because of her little sister's loose tongue, they would take away their beloved mom. Psychologists consider Mariana Fabocci's maternal qualities as non-existent. She doesn't remember her children's birthdays, works as a prostitute in her own neighborhood. She had crises where she'd run out naked into the street and demand a man. Most neighbors think she's out of her mind. Maybe not in her right mind, but she came up with her own version of Fortuna's death and made the whole family support that version. Marianne had enough mental ability for that. Enough vocabulary to call your daughter a dumbass for being scared Kiko will leave the hospital and tell the truth? It was cruel enough to tell her that her friend had died and would never speak again. It was cold-blooded enough to manipulate his daughter, making her fabricate stories about how everything is wonderful in the family. So perfect that every listener knows the girl is lying. And her lies are so obvious, it's clear who is putting pressure on her. I wonder who pressured Grandma Angela, forcing her to defend her son-in-law, claiming against all evidence that there was nothing in their house. Absolutely nothing bad happened. Basically, when the relatives were banned from visiting, Daria began to gradually relax and started speaking too. At first with the secret diary given by the psychologist, then with the psychologist herself, and then with the psychologist in the presence of the investigator. She never gave any testimony against her mother, or at least she thought she didn't. But she sure did about Uncle Tito. He's dirty and must pay for everything he's done. Daria confirmed. Uncle Tito loved girls. His daughter, his stepdaughters, and even the neighbor. Sometimes during such love, he whispered in Daria's ear that he killed Fortuna, and that if the girl resisted, he could kill her too. And yes, on that fateful day, Fortuna came to visit them as usual to play. She had uncomfortable sandals and decided to run home to change them. Following her, Uncle Tito came out, and Daria decided to follow them. What if her stepfather loves not only Daria and her sisters, but Fortuna too? In this horrible story, everything is terrifying. But is that enough to explain why a 10-year-old girl went to the roof because... that she was jealous of her abuser's attention to another victim? Because this little girl hasn't had any other love in her life. And why did her mother go with her? Daria says that upon reaching the terrace, she saw Uncle Tito lying on the ground. He was assaulting her, and she was hitting him with her fists and kicking. Then he grabbed her and dragged her to the edge of the roof. I heard a scream, got scared, and ran away. Mom fainted, and Tito gave her water with sugar. Messy and confused, Daria didn't even see the moment of the fall. Yet a new accusation was brought against Raymond Caputo based on this testimony. There are very few good moments in this story, but there are a couple. Tito couldn't read, and someone had to read all the procedural documents to him. So, the charge of raping and killing the minor Fortuna Lafreda was read to him aloud in the common cell. They started beating him immediately, and then within just 1 month, he wrote 3 requests to be transferred to another prison and attempted suicide once by swallowing a blade. Caputo's accomplice was educated, but that didn't save her. When Mariana Fabozzi was transferred to a cell for violating the conditions of her house arrest, prisoners there were already aware of her parental successes. As a result, not only she, but also the guards who tried to rescue her needed medical assistance. Eventually she tried to hang herself but failed again. The process was slow and hard. The child is referred to as a weak witness in judicial terms, and Daria was effectively the only one. At some point, Caputo started blaming it all on his roommates, saying she had a tendency to throw kids from heights. He said she pushed Antonio's son out of the window on purpose, and also Fortuna. Mariana kept repeating the same thing like a woodpecker throughout the whole process. I don't know anything. When Fortuna fell, Caputo was in the yard and the son fell down trying to look at the helicopter. They exhumed the poor boy's body, but naturally after several years since the funeral, no traces of the push were found. Then Tito declared that the girl was thrown from the roof by both Mariana and Daria. A new witness has appeared in the case, Mario Della Valle, who alleges that his cellmate Caputo confessed to killing Fortuna. But at first we didn't believe him. In response, other cellmates felt it necessary to clarify the situation and wrote a collective letter to the court, stating that while Caputo and Della Valle are both complete perverts, but Laval is lying about Caputo confessing to the murder. According to Article 192 of the Italian Penal Code, the judge evaluates evidence based on his or her free conviction. On July 7, 2017, for the murder of the girl, Raimondo Caputo was sentenced to life imprisonment, plus 14 years for child abuse. And although some doubt that he actually committed the murder, everyone still thought the punishment was deserved. Mariana's case is different. On one hand, 10 years for being an accomplice is quite a lot. But on the other hand, it turns out she'll be released in 10 years. And although her daughters will never return to her, Italian laws do not mandate forced sterilization, so no one can stop her from having more children. In the same place, with the same wonderful people and the same wonderful men. No, of course not. Not everyone in Parco Verde is a pervert. Petro Lafredo, the biological father of Fortuna and her older brother, and Gina Argilli, the parent of Daria Alessandra and the deceased Antonio, were not involved in anything like that. Petro was sitting on, in general, a not-so-serious article, cigarette smuggling and counterfeit video trade. Gina is quite a harmless simpleton whom Mariana Fabozzi wouldn't let near the children, threatening him with the same window as her son fell out of. Both fathers genuinely mourned at their children's graves, coming there together for some reason, and with journalists in tow. Before, says Genaro, he couldn't because his ex-wife forbade it. When asked how she could technically stop him from coming to the cemetery, the grief-stricken father couldn't answer. Well, why his daughters are in an orphanage waiting for adoption despite having a living father, no one even bothered to ask. Petro Lafredo said that he sent fellow inmates who were being released to check on their families, and they reported that everything was fine. He said that it was not Caputo who actually killed his daughter, and he knows exactly who did it. And as soon as he gets out, that person will be in big trouble. After being released from prison, Petro found a new family and kids, working part-time selling coconuts on the beach. In February 2023, he appeared on the news, seemingly caught trying to sell drugs. After watching the video, the judge said Lafredo looked more like a buyer than a seller, and placed him under house arrest. The judge evaluates the evidence at his own discretion. Rachele Di Domenico and her children Claudia and Emilia Longo, who were directly accused by Petro Lafredo of his daughter's murder, are living their lives as usual. By the way, the father of the girl who was abused for years had no complaints against Raimundo Caputo. Why, he says, it's all because of neighborhood feuds, they've simply blamed everything on him. Actually, the scapegoat admitted to harassing children. Worse, according to him, everybody knew. Absolutely everyone. In this house on the first floor, there was a children's room. Everyone knew about it too. The question arises, did Fortuna's mother know? Domenica Guardata, nicknamed Mima, in my opinion, is the most mysterious character in this story, even though she appeared on camera more than anyone else. Looks adequate, especially compared to the rest of the characters. There are some questions from the police, though, but selling fake bills in their neighborhood is a minor issue. Father Francesco Guardata was arrested in 2017 for running a brothel, but not here, in a neighboring city. He did not live with Domenica and her mother. The apartment is perfectly tidy, and there are 3 children, 2 even from the same father, whom Mother Mima takes care of. She categorically denies that her daughter could have been subjected to violence. There was no violence, and there couldn't have been any. Kika always told everything, and she didn't mention anything about this. When asked how she didn't notice the marks on her daughter's body, she replied that the girl was very independent and took care of her personal hygiene herself. On one hand, it's hard to believe that the mother hadn't seen the girl without clothes for a long time, especially since the doctor concluded it all began before Fortuna turned 5. On the other hand, locals say they consider children to be those who crawl or have just started walking, assuming they're old enough. By the way, the pediatrician didn't notice anything either. They complained about burning, and she prescribed an ointment without even looking. Mom refused to believe even the conclusion of the expert who examined the body, where the gynecologist described the injuries and added verbally that in 46 years of work, he had never seen such horror before. Perhaps the mother can still be understood. It is much easier to retreat into protective denial than to face such a truth. Your child was regularly and brutally tortured for many months, and you did nothing and did not protect them at all. It's understandable to be outraged, no matter which district you live in. If you saw what was happening, why didn't you grab the kids and run from that horrible place? But have you ever seen if you can measure with the same yardstick those who have lived as hostages of the ghetto since birth? Who have no idea that there is hell around because they have never seen anything else? And this, in my opinion, is the scariest part of this story. The investigator who handled Fortuna's case, Federico Bisceglia. He told the parish priest that according to their data, 90% of the girls in Parco Verde are being harassed. 90%. 9 out of 10. Only 2, maybe 3 at most, in the class were lucky. And not just in the class, also in the kindergarten group. And no one, absolutely no one, even tries to protect them. Bisceglia tried. He refused to label the case as an accident, dug deep and wide, ordered expert evaluations, and demanded wiretaps. He saw saving these children as his duty, his life's work. And so it happened. On the 1st of March 2015, Federico Bisceglia died in a car accident. Despite the extremely strange circumstances of the accident, the car suddenly lost control and flew off the road on a flat surface. The colleagues' investigators did not conduct any examinations. They quickly filed the case away in the archive, and the wonderful residents of the wonderful district arranged a fireworks display in honor of his death. Again, in their houses, harassed children fly out of windows, and they celebrate with fireworks the death of the one who tried to find the guilty. Now few doubt that Bisceglia was murdered. He had already conducted several serious cases against mafia interests, but while investigating billion-dollar scams involving toxic waste dumping, he was still alive. But when he got involved in the family affairs of the residents of the Green Park, he died. And yes, this district is considered the territory of the Italian mafia Camorra. The Sauto Sicarelli clan holds power. Everything's under control, not a mouse will slip by, and housewives ask permission from watchers to leave the house for groceries. They say it is considered Camorra territory because I do not understand how this is possible. The Camorra, claiming to be an honorable society with respect and principles, having a constitution article about respecting women and children, and even killing pedophile bosses, allows everyone to know about the children's room in its territory. It's one of 2 things. Either the Camorra is not just a bunch of low-life thieves, but a gathering of bandits who don't care how they make money, or the residents of Verde Park can't control even the Camorra. And honestly, I still don't know which of the 2 options is true. In the summer of 2023, a district which should have been demolished a quarter of a century ago made headlines across the country again. 2 girls, aged 10 and 12, were lured to the grounds of an abandoned sports complex by a group of 16 boys. And one of the girls' brothers accidentally saw a video on the internet of what was happening there. Details emerged. It turned out that the episode wasn't the only one. Everything continues for several months following roughly the same pattern. The girls are met at their homes, taken to a secluded place. Only the composition, number, and age of the gang members changes. The whole adult community of Parco Verde looks like a terrible kaleidoscope. No matter how you turn it, the pattern remains the same, because the pieces differ only in their degree of darkness. Both girls were relocated out of the area and taken from their parents. It was deemed unsafe for their mental and physical health to stay there. Additionally, they dug into family portraits and found that the grandfather of one of them was a school janitor. There are 2 allegations of molestation against children. The mother of the second child drinks heavily and does not deny that she is unable to look after her daughter. She managed, although clearly not on the first try, to record an appeal to Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni under the guidance of a lawyer. The Prime Minister is supposed to provide her housing further away from Parco Verde so that she, as a mother, can finally take care of her children. Well, what else? Asking the government to provide and ensure certain things is normal here. Speaking of the government, Don Maurizio, who used to write letters inviting each new Prime Minister to come see life in the slums, finally got through. In less than a year, Meloni came to visit. She promised to restore the sports complex, clean up the place, and that everything would be fine. But right after she left, the locals staged demonstrations about who was in charge here, with car races without rules and chaotic shooting from Kalashnikovs, on whoever God sends their way. The government really doesn't like it when it's publicly shown the middle finger. So instead of the 60 police officers requested by the priest, 400 showed up, and they cleared out, reportedly, all 13 drug dealers' spots. Well, almost all, and they're even patrolling the streets. In short, the question of who is in charge here has become a pressing one. The only thing unclear is what the answer will be. They saw patrols in Green Park. The seasoned ones would disperse, gathering a crowd of 50 people. They are against the Prime Minister. She promises pools, but she cancelled the benefits that could support everyone who wasn't in the mood to work. So, speaking out against her in a chat or even yelling through the barricades is an easy task. They are generally very brave when making demands from the authorities. But it was only one little girl who dared to speak out against the paedophile, with no one else to protect her but herself. What will be the fate of the Neapolitan ghetto with the beautiful name Green Park is unknown, but is a happy ending possible here? Even 1 million police officers won't help where the code of silence protects anything but the lives of one's own children. No matter how much debt the state takes on, it can't help someone who never thought that their life is their own responsibility. Some things only they themselves can do. Once upon a time, in Italy.